immense pleasure to welcome you all to the Sai Exchange episode 8. Today, we will be joining with us with Professor Sujata Ramani, who have completed her B in Civil Engineering and ME in Soil Mechanics, and continued her PhD at Shastra University, focusing on geotechnical engineering. Welcoming, ma'am. To begin your journey as a PhD candidate like us, so can you explain your landslides and uphill climbs during your PhD journey at Shastra, ma'am?
Um, so, okay, I will say good evening to all the audience here, and thank you all for joining us. So, I started as a geotechnical engineer. This landslide was sort of on the fringe area because in geotechnical engineering we are more concerned with finding out whether single slopes are safe or not. So then. With my guide, we decided that we can do a little more because at that time, the susceptibility mapping, which means that to identify areas which are prone to landslides, it was in early 2000. So you should understand that at that time, the susceptibility mapping was not so very popular like it is today. So we thought that yes, we can go ahead to identify the slopes and then we can move on to solutions to mitigate them. So that is how I started with an area that was not exactly my expertise. So from there, I moved on to mapping, which is more of the geospatial work, and then from there again I came back to my original core area, geotechnical engineering, tying all them together.
Ma'am, like during 20s, ma'am, it was a popular fields like medicines, even engineering, so on. So, people used to aim for the space as well. But why you choose geotechnical engineering? What made you to choose?
Okay. Actually, when I was in school, my favorite subject was geography. So I wanted only to specialize in geography. So, but the typical Indian household, my mom was sort of said, no, I'm going to disown you if you're not going into a professional course. So then I somehow, it was all, I should say, more of divine providence that I selected civil engineering, and then I found something so close to what I wanted, the geotechnical engineering.
Oh.
So the minute I saw that I was connecting to earth and earth materials, yes, that was the pull.
Okay, that's very nice, ma'am. As you said, earth material. There's a time during our childhood, ma'am, like during 2012, people used to say the earth was going to end. So, as a geo technician, as an engineer, how do you react to that prediction? Does earth really has any expiry time like that?
Okay, so as a engineer or as a technical person, I don't think that Earth is going to stop overnight. That is not going to happen. Even in 2012, I knew that, but I was teaching in Shastra at that time, so I pretty well knew that. But okay, those kinds of things do come up. You knew about 2012, the Mayan calendar, but I think there was also another big drama over 2000 where that century was, turning around. So it does happen, but those things are, in Hollywood. I mean, they are dramatized, over the social media and visual platforms, but it is not going to happen in a day. But what we really have to understand is that every day Earth is changing.
Okay.
Not today or yesterday. I mean, millions of years since it is formed. Like first we had one single unit, Pangaea, and then it split into all the continents. Now we see that the continental plates towards the upper Himalayas are moving. So this is a constant movement, and as a result, we always will see changes. So change is a constant.
As you said, changes. Again, during COVID time, which is a huge pandemic where huge crises were happening. But during that time, in over the televisions and social medias, there were again geotechnicians used to say now Earth is again reshaping it. A lot of greeneries, a lot of things has been changing it, where human induced disasters less has been coming being changed against this pandemic period where human activity is very less. So how do you say that as human activities are inducing any changes to the earth or not in link with the COVID pandemics?
No, in link with the COVID pandemic, we gave some rest to nature. So automatically there was a self-cleansing process and it beautifully recouped, and we can see that change in short term in even very congested urban spaces where we were able to listen to birds, and we can see all our wetlands in the urban spaces really spring up with good water and all that. But coming back to your question as I don't know how as a geotechnical engineer how it is, but generally as a person concerned with the environment, I would say that yes, human interference does have a huge impact on the environment. That is true for anybody who just watches, but that doesn't mean that we should bring development to a standstill. I mean, that is why we are all technical people, to ensure that we grow, but we grow in a way that we have the nature unharmed, and it's also cherished along the way of our growth.
Okay. So as I said, ma'am, day to day, the Earth is having some changes, so and so. But during this past during this year, even past years and all, we can see a lot of landslides happening throughout. And again, your fast track projects also objective titles on supporting the spatial design support for the slopes and all. So how do these predictions of your project helps in improvements or supporting these landslides and delaying or in prevention any methods?
Okay, so there are many parts to your question, so I would like to take it one by one. So the first thing I would like to clarify is when I was doing my research for my PhD, or when I was doing the Kodaikanal project where I was trying to develop a decision support system, it might look like it's totally computer stuff, but actually it was more landslide mapping kind of stuff. So like when we look at this so sort of it's like first we were not trying to predict, we were trying to assess the zones which were prone to landslide based on their geo-environmental setting.
Okay.
So the one thing about my project, the first project that I did was that till then, at least within Tamil Nadu, there was a consumption. There was like a thought that landslides were all put together. Actually, mass movements include debris flow, landslides, rock slides, including small slums and all that. So the very idea was that I had to bring in that connecting factor for so many of the different types of mass movements into one technical document which can address how we can map them, what factors were important in assessing them, because everything was unique. If you look at a debris is a fall. It's very rapid at times. Sometimes, depending on the material, it can also take a little bit of time. But anyway, there's a huge mass of soil, rock, anything that is on the slope that just washes and comes down. And so the velocity just depends on the momentum that is created, the gradient and all that. But if you look at a landslide like thing, like it is basically where your particular slope does give away with respect to the strength parameters in the soil. So that was the that was the connecting thread where we had put so many different kind of mass movements into one single platform, and then that identified the factors. That was very important because every area or a region, every geo environment has it's very unique. So even in that is the most important thing about geotechnical engineering. Soil is very heterogeneous. Even in a few centimeters, you can really see some extremely different kind of soil with a very different behavior. So that means that you cannot address the entire region in a single stretch. So this definitely had to be done in small bits, and then they had to be connected. So that is how we had been doing. So that was the first idea. It was not prediction, but it was basically susceptibility. Susceptibility was very important basically because at that time whenever there were a kind of, if they had to plan for any kind of disaster management at the district level, these were very important tools. They had to know where is a high prone area so that they can prioritize on that particular area. Okay, what was the other part of?
You answered it, ma'am. Like connecting to questions, you said a lot of parameters being includes during year 2000. But now it being 2025, we have AI technologies, ML, artificial, so on so. How do you see this AI technology in helping out, finding out the parameters, ma'am?
Okay, back in no, I am not. I feel that they are not many different things. They are all together. What we are basically trying is to like bring in the data and find some useful meaning to them and
Okay.
use them for prediction or susceptibility or hazard mapping. So. The problem with AI is that no, there's not a problem. Actually, AI is very, very helpful, I should say. Only maybe we are taking a little time to adapt to it. But when you talk about AI in terms of mapping or prediction, we actually go back to this models, the machine learning models. So you have a lot of machine learning models, and if you look at the literature, there are so many different models that have been applied for landslide studies later on in the later 2015 and so on. But earlier also they were there. But the problem was data.
Okay.
So that is very, very difficult to get. So once a hazard, see, for example, just for understanding, I would talk about a flood because all of us are familiar with flood. There is a flood. Okay, so the flood would have been huge, or the impact of that flood on that particular locality would have been very huge. The inundation level would have been very high. But what happens once it recedes? Who would know what level it rose to? Or who would know where it was really heavy unless there's a documentation there? So when you want to create a model, this data is very important, and these models are very sensitive to data. So when you go for a machine learning model, it demands a lot of data, which actually in the field is not really available. Today, actually, there is the Bookosh website that is put up by the Geological Survey of India. That's one of the very good things that they have come up with. Like, they had tried to, consolidate so many geological parameters, including the type of rock, the soil overburden, where there have been landslides or where there have been lineaments, so many different geological segments they have actually for almost the entire India they have put up. But earlier then it was not like that. So being very data sensitive, it was much better to handle them not in AI but machine learning models, but in statistical models which demanded a little lesser data.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for the insight. Again, we microbiologists, ma'am, we usually work front of the lab inside a room, but you went on the field as a woman and you have your friends. So, how do you feel that experience with your colleagues, as well as followingly the second question, how the supporting peoples around the village or the non-technical staffs, like how they support you, ma'am, even though they never knows about our research ideas.
Yeah, I had actually, I should say, I was lucky to have very pleasant experiences that I cherish till date, though they might not be very technical, but I have always connected with all those people that I have been meeting for data collection because I was working on hill roads. So there you don't have settlements. So there are only some fruit stalls or a bakery, and there might be a few people who are living up the slope with a small orchard or something like that. But uh, luckily, they have been very friendly, and I still date I reckon that when I first went in 2006 for my PhD data collection, they would never understand what a landslide is within the Kodaikanal town. That was the area that I worked for my PhD. So when I went back in 2012 again to the hill road, I was little worried because there people also will not be there. So in 2012, we were collecting data. We explained what we were doing, and we were installing some small piezometers to measure water level and all that. So they were all okay. They did not react much, but they just connected, and we said okay, bye. But 2014, there were landslides, and there were a variety of lands. There was a rock fall, there was a debris, and then there was a landslide. So when I went back, that highway engineer actually told me, these people told me that there were two. I went with one of my consultants there, like he's a very good friend who is a specialist on rocks. I am more into soil, so I had asked him for a favor to assist me with rock assessment. So those people told him that no, there were already two people who told us that there will be landslides. So it was like we were informed, and it was good. So that is something I cherish, and I had really collected well.
That's a great thing. Ma'am. Like, what is the first question the people surrounding locality will ask you when you're in the field, ma'am, about your project? What you're doing
You
is
should never go there when there's a landslide, because that is when they are expecting compensations.
Oh.
So that's the first thing to avoid.
okay.
But later, or if you go there for a study a little later, yes, they would ask what actually happened, because we are not talking about urban society here. These people, it's not that they are. It's not that they don't know things, but the thing is like for them to understand that their land is going to be susceptible to landslides or any kind of hazard for that matter will naturally unsettle them, right? So those kinds of questions like what should we do, can we avoid it, that kind of questions we used to have, and when we explain, they are quite understanding. That is my experience.
I'm like, what was your first thought when you saw the live landslide? What had happened? The moment you saw the landslide during the field.
Actually, I have not seen live landslides,
Okay.
but I have visited the sites immediately after the landslide.
Okay.
So that is a bit chaotic, where people are trying to get their bearings, because they would have suffered some damage, and see, the damage can be huge or small, but it's very personal, and that's an unsettling time. And I always feel that uh, we might have to give them that space to settle, and later on, when they settle, if we go back to get our data, that is a much better thing.
Okay. Ma'am, again, talking on landslides, whether it's natural disasters or it's human induced.
See, any hazard is a natural process only.
Okay.
Landslides are basically a geomorphic process that happens, but now we are very aware of them because we are everywhere. We have taken up all the space that's available, so now we know that. Earlier, if there was a very huge landslide in a remote hill area, we might not know. That could be only covered in the news as a small thing, like what we hear about wildfires today, right? But now what we are doing, we are everywhere. So now automatically that falls into our purview, like we have to think and do something about them. That doesn't mean that we should not go there, but only thing is we should be responsible enough not to trigger a landslide.
As you said goodly, ma'am, where hilly regions we see landslides, and again in metropolitan cities like Mumbai, Bangalore, Chennai, we see floods. And again in forest areas we see forest fires, so on. So all over the earth, there is some other disasters being broken in monthly or in yearly, so on. So how you see this one? So what is the activities being?
No,
Whether Earth is having its own how you say repurpose or
No, like I told you, Arvind, this is more like a process that we are getting aware of now, but Earth has been doing this for years and years and years. It's more than a millennium.
okay.
You know erosion, right?
Okay,
So
yeah.
erosion is like, it's been happening. See, 1 centimeter of soil will form only after 100 years of erosion.
Okay.
So 100 years there is erosion too, but we see so much of soil now, but we can't say that suddenly because the soil in our canal bank is eroding, we can't say erosion just came up today. So this is a natural process that all landslides are also geomorphic, waterfalls. So how do waterfalls get formed? It's also like because soft rocks are exposed and then water starts eroding it, and then we have a water. So this happens. See, waterfalls will not happen in a day. It takes years and years and years, maybe hundreds of years, right? All the tectonic movements. So it is a process that's happening. So where do we come in is when we want to utilize this area, we have to build responsibly.
Okay, as actually we have a meme for this one, ma'am. At the end of the
Okay.
section, we just predicted before it. That's a nice thing, ma'am.
Okay.
Moving to the next section, ma'am. Current issues and policy, ma'am. We can see rainfalls eventually becoming more frequent in India. Do you feel our current disaster management policies are enough to handle the increasing landslide risk factors and all?
So, as regard to policy, there is one thing that I always feel, this is a personal thing. It's not with respect to the policies, it is how well we are adapting and adhering to those policies.
Okay.
That is what I really feel, because it can be a landslide, it can be a flood, it can be a tsunami. It's not that there are no guidelines for protecting ourselves against it. There are clear policies. If you look at, if you look at seashores, there's a clear policy that demarcates the area from where you have to build. So if you are going to, overstep that limit and you're going to build on it, definitely there is going to be some repercussion. And similarly for landslides, we know that is where this susceptibility assessment comes in. So like we know which zones are vulnerable. So if there is a very fragile zone, if we can avoid, yes, but today I don't think avoiding that kind of zone is a very practical solution, because look at the urban explosion, because every urban spaces, have simply sprawled everywhere. Earlier there were clear urban spaces, but now today you see that every town or even rural settings and all, they're all trying to mimic the urban spaces. So it's a huge toll on nature, but we have to ensure that we are following the policies. Policies are there, but we have to be mindful of them, and we should respect those policies so that we can have a sustainable development.
Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, in your opinion, if there is a one policy where you can introduce that makes a big impact in reducing the landslide related disaster in India, what could be from your experience?
Okay, so this again, it is not my idea, it is government's idea. The policy is already in place.
Okay.
You first have to map before you build.
Oh,
That is what all these codal provisions are there for. That is where you have all the planning bodies, you have the government departments, the National Disaster Management Institute.
Okay.
So like they do a lot of work.
Okay.
So their work starts from educating people on these kinds of disasters, and then creating vulnerability maps for the regions, assessing regions that are affected by these natural hazards. It's not only landslide. It can be an earthquake. It can be a flood, or it can be a landslide. Whatever it is, they have this kind of assessment. They have the kind of they have the mitigation strategies. So again, I would say that we have to know where to build, what to build, and when to build.
So it said that our Indian government is on the track on policies.
Yes, they
That's
are.
very nice, ma'am. The natural disasters often become political talking after they happen, ma'am. But what can researchers and policymakers do together to shift the focus towards the prevention, not just after, post-disaster responses?
Okay, so there is today the social media is very vibrant. So and usually what really catches us early is the kind of criticisms that are coming. Like for example, the floods in Chennai. There are so many efforts that are being taken to handle them. When you take such efforts, we cannot predict. See, today we are in an era of extreme events. Earlier, if you look at a decade earlier, what would have been the case is that there would really be, predicted rainfall. There can be a 15% more or less kind of thing. But today, the rainfall that has to come for a year or a month just falls on one particular. So today is like extreme events that are very difficult to predict. So in such cases, we also have to appreciate what is done, and we really have to take up on that and then build on those kinds of initiatives that are taken up by any government. It can be the Indian government or the government of Tamil Nadu. For example, I don't know how many of you know about these sponge parks that are in Chennai.
Okay.
So you have the MS Swaminathan Wetland Park. So what does it basically do? It is an urban sponge to take in the flood water. So such efforts, they have actually planned for 57 and then I think 30 are completed, but I don't have the statistics. One thing that is operational is this MS Swaminathan. I think this is in Porur or something. So it's a good effort, and also while we are trying to expand infrastructure, we have to take into account to sustainably correlate these factors with development.
That's nice, ma'am. Ma'am, every researcher will be having this thought in their mind, ma'am, including me when I'm going as independent researchers. So, if you have your unlimited funding, so what could be your implementation?
Yeah, that is a dream, and I would very much welcome it. So today yeah, there are not much efforts done on integrated hazard study, because today climate change has taken up most of our attention, and this hazard scenario also is changing. It's not like there's only a landslide, there's a there's a torrential rainfall, it's an extreme event. So that is a concern now. There are floods associated with landslides. So we all know about these Kerala floods. Every year they have huge flooding, they have landslides, debris fall, and then they have erosion. And then subsequently comes the disruption in the urban environment. So, what I would really like to do is to have a integrated study on particularly urban environments, because that is where we have a lot of infrastructure and people, and that is where where we have to put in a lot of effort in preserving the nature, to have an integrated study on multi-hazard perspectives.
Oh, that's very, very interesting, ma'am. I hope it comes true. Ma'am, ma'am, can you describe your most challenging project where everything seems to go wrong, but it turned it around?
I didn't have a challenge like that.
Good.
But what I would say is, see, every project has its time when you are really, you know, you are in a catch. Every project will have that. It's not one project. Every project you will plan for something, and then there's a catch, and then you have to sit, and then you have to think through and definitely bang your head on whatever is available, and then you have a dawn moment, and then you just complete it. So for every project I've had that. I had that for the DSS project because I had all the data, and when I had to think about a decision support system, I was really thinking like, what is the decision that I have to, what should be the hypothesis, and how should I really give a meaningful output for that particular decision support system, because I was more on identifying factors and getting all these landslides, other type of mass movements and all that. But what I didn't really think about at that moment is, okay, now I have everything, what next? So then that is when I thought that I have to integrate all the factors, and then given a set of factors, my model will have to predict when there will be a rock fall, where there will be a rock fall, or where there will be a debris slide. So that was one, but I had this for every project. So don't want to go on.
When you say every project, as researchers, we'll feel that catch in every terms of experiments and protocol, so and so. But how do you feel, ma'am, when you escape from one catch and the other catch is waiting for you? How do you feel
Oh,
that? Whether
that-
you will like it or
I definitely don't like it. I don't like it, but still now I understand that that's the norm, and
okay,
actually I understand that that is what is the indicator that I am trying to do something new.
okay,
If I don't get a catch there, it means that it's already there. I am traveling a path that is already taken. So when I really feel like lost is when there is no road there.
okay.
So yes, we have to make a road and move on.
Oh, nice, nice, ma'am. With this catch also, you've been collaborated with a lot of societies, giving DST, NBRT, and TNC, CST, so on. How do you manage the research across the multi-government agencies with the different priorities, ma'am?
Researchers actually come with, honestly, I have done one project at a time.
Okay.
I have always prioritized that like that. I have one problem, I finish that, and then I move on to the next problem. So I have never had, uh, I have never had overlaps. I plan it that way. So that, and also, see, I had two projects in landslides. One was for susceptibility mapping, and other one was hazard. So where and when. So I thought that was complete. Then I moved on to where I can do something with core civil engineering. We were developing blocks, soil blocks as such. So those blocks came with natural additives. So we were moving on to some kind of civil engineering, and then again I moved on to contaminant flow.
Okay.
So that was never overlapping.
It's interesting. Ma'am, moving to your personal journey and background, you joined as a PhD at Sastra. So, how was the experience, ma'am, at Sastra, being a PhD candidate?
You will
Now-
all know that better than me.
How was the 2000? We are in 21st.
Okay. Yeah, so there's an upgrade, I could say.
Yeah.
See, actually, I joined as a faculty. I joined as a lecturer, and then I joined as a part-time internal candidate.
Okay.
So it was my academic responsibilities versus my research responsibilities.
From PhD to the professor, how was the transformation? Like you have worked under the guide and now you are getting a scholar. So, what is the movement?
I always try to remember how I felt as a scholar.
Oh, that's very
So,
nice. I think
that's to keep my bearing on the ground.
I think that's what helped you in three successive best award, ma'am, from 2001 to 2023. So, what made the students to be the best for the moments? What was the reason, ma'am? Where all the students used to
As
say,
a teacher,
as a teacher.
actually, teaching is a passion for me.
Okay.
So I picked out teaching that, and I had really planned my career to be only a teacher, nothing more. So entire career plan was to be a teacher, and somehow it makes me really happy, and the question also makes me very happy to relive this moment. So it's like I really connect. I try to connect. That's my first thing in a class. Is like I try to connect with the class, perhaps particularly with people who are trying to move away from me in the last bench, and who are trying to hide from me. That is where I really try to connect. So once I get a connection there, I feel that I have the class for me, and there I don't know if I will transfer every bit of information to them, but at least I will tell them that okay, I am here to help you out. So you have a problem, you can come and you can learn from me.
So, ma'am, then in those days, you were first bench or last bench or middle bench, ma'am?
I was a last bench.
Why you choose last, ma'am?
I don't know, but that is always, that bench has been calling to me.
Oh, that's very nice, ma'am. I'm not a middle bench guy. Ma'am.
Middle
Safer.
bench.
Yeah, it's always safer. I'm looking back at your PhD. What is the one problem you faced that you wish no other research scholar have to experience?
This, I don't know. I didn't. No, I had a lot of problems, like because I was not working in my core area. I was working on an area that was allied to my core area. So I had to learn the basics of that particular, that particular field. The geospatial technology was something all Greek and Latin to me. So I had to start there.
Okay.
So I had to learn GIS, I had to learn their jargon, and I had to understand what they were talking, and then rest followed.
Okay. So, ma'am, what advice you give us to the young researchers who feel stuck in the research?
That means you're really close to completing your research.
Oh, that's very nice, ma'am. Ma'am, ma'am, in terms of your PhD, why you choose as a professorship, like not for any industrialist or any of entrepreneur? What made you to be a professor?
I
Anyone inspired you, ma'am?
My dad was a professor, so I grew up in an academic environment. We were in a campus.
Okay.
So I grew up in an academic environment, and that I feel is my comfort zone. So I never thought of any other profession than teaching at all.
Okay.
So wanted to be a teacher, so I moved towards that, and I became a teacher.
Okay.
That's all.
And then when you become as a teacher, as a professor, every people will ask the same question. It's the same question. How you handle the stress? Do you believe in stress, ma'am? First of all,
Yeah. I
you
have
believe in
stress.
stress.
Yeah, of course, I do believe in stress.
Okay. So how you
How
handle
do
it?
I handle it? Okay, I don't take much to my head, and
Okay.
I know like many of my scholars are also here. So I have a day, I make sure they have a piece of my mind, but there I stop, and then things get back to the state where we all start working.
Okay.
That is true for my classes also. So I never try to try to hide the displeasure that I have in their academic skill set. So like if I am not happy with something academically, I make it a point to tell them that I am not happy and they have to change.
Okay.
Luckily they did.
Okay.
So
Ma'am, people say like, should I ask age at a woman, ma'am? So I'm not going to ask your age. So during this period, ma'am, from being adult and then you came as a student bachelor, graduated, then became a PhD, then you're being a researcher. So which part of the life you enjoyed a lot and you learned a lot?
actually there's been learning. I enjoyed a lot, and learned a lot has been two different segments for me.
Okay.
I enjoyed a lot as a student in undergraduate and postgraduate studies. That was all fun time. But actually, I think I should have learned there. That is what has helped me to pitch my, career in a good place. And I have been successful in the career only because I should have learned something there. Learning has come in my professional environment. That I cannot deny. I have met people, I have had experiences that has really taught me many lessons, and what I am today has been molded by my professional environment.
We came to know like your profession so far. What is your hobbies, ma'am?
I read a lot. I'm a voracious reader,
Okay.
but now I am also watching Netflix a lot.
Oh, that's nice, ma'am. Ma'am, being a voracious reader of books, like whether fictions or real time
Strictly fiction.
fiction. Okay, then my question is like, if you want a fiction character in your life, what could it be?
Okay. I would like to be Hermione Granger,
Oh, who is it, ma'am?
the Harry
explain?
Potter character who
Oh.
was reading a lot.
Nice, nice, nice. Ma'am, finally, ma'am, what is a question that you expected from me which I didn't ask? Do you have anything like that?
No, Arvind. At
No.
this point, I'm happy that you asked only questions that were very comfortable for me.
Oh, thank you, ma'am. So we have your meme videos where
Okay.
we need your thought on the first side. How
Okay.
you see it, ma'am?
Cool.
Ma'am, this is the trending memes during the flights. How you see this?
Okay, pretty cool. And also should
Any
say
two ways, ma'am. Positive, negative.
no. See, a meme is not so negative,
Negative, okay.
but I would say that everybody are not so lucky. Usually, you topple.
Okay. So we have a next video.
What's that?
It's called Cloud Blast, ma'am.
Cloud.
Yes,
Okay. It's a. Oh, okay. I got it. Okay. See, this cloudburst is something that we are hearing only in the last 2 decades.
Yeah.
So, but it doesn't mean that there were no cloudbursts.
Okay.
But we should thank social media for bringing us so many things in life. So, but that is a very serious thing. Right now, I think in the past 2 weeks, we have had one in Uttarakhand, two in Jammu and Kashmir, and they are, these are some things that we can really not plan for.
I'm actually predicting the future. Ma'am. We have the next video of Uttarakhand. I think
Okay.
the second videos. Yeah, next videos.
For
So
sure
this is
that
the flood. This is a
Okay.
before flood. So here, where I want to point out is this is a natural scenario. Ma'am. When flood comes, you can see it. But why there is any actions taken for developments process, anything is happening? How you see this one, ma'am? Before and after the flood?
No, actually, so this is a constructed. Okay. So this is sort of a constructed site only.
Okay.
See, actually, I remember once long back when we were in Roorkee for a conference, we went to the Lesser Himalayas,
Okay.
where we were just seeing something like this.
Okay.
So then we traveled down, and by the time we came to Haridwar, they were telling us that a group of students were stuck in a flood like this.
Okay.
So this is something that you can't really predict.
Okay.
You can't really predict in the sense that the entire region has to be alert for this kind of thing, but actually you can't pinpoint and predict,
Okay. Okay.
at least now.
Okay. Ma'am, this is a famous meme which was trending when the flood of Ganga was there. So,
Okay.
what is the first sight you see?
Okay, some people are really cool when their house is flooded with water.
Okay, ma'am. Thanks a lot, ma'am. I think the section is open for discussion. Audience are welcome.
Good evening.
Thank you for your nice experience. As you told that you are keen interest in geography from childhood, I have understood that Kumarikandam is really exists, or it's a myth, or it was went down to the ocean due to disaster.
I am, yeah,
Or you
that's.
are interested.
I see, like all people scrolling, I do have interest in everything that comes with my feed. So I have also gone through this Kumarikandam, but what I can tell you is that I don't know if Kumarikandam really existed. I don't have any scientific proof for that, but I can tell you about Pumbuhar, which really existed. It was an ancient port city, and it did go underwater. And there are now today bathymetric studies. Even one of those studies are being done in Shastra. One of my colleagues is actually doing a bathymetry on the possibility of finding this remains in the ocean where the Pumbuhar city has submerged. But that's the truth. That's scientific. Okay. Yes, ma'am. Good evening. Pardon? Recent flash floods in Mumbai. It always happens. See, because basically because those cities are having populations that are more than more than is simply understatement, right? So and also if you look at Bangalore, Bangalore, I have a little idea about Bangalore because basically when we were young, that was one of our favorite places, like where we used to go. And at that time, the Bangalore was so different with so many water bodies. But today, everything is taken up by apartments, residential areas. So automatically, you are closing up all natural sinks, and this is bound to happen. So what more can be done is to have a very good integrated water drainage system for the city, which should actually have been done first for any city, be it Mumbai or Bangalore or Chennai for that matter. We first have to look at that possibility as the city is overgrowing itself.
Landslide of Kerala, nearby Wayanad.
Yes. See, in I can say every year it is repeating, but the thing is that it is not like it's not like it is not taken care of. In Wayanad, there has been an extensive study by IIT Indore where they have also identified the trigger levels and they have identified what rainfall can cause a landslide. But a natural disaster, that is why it is natural. See, what happened in Wayanad last time was soil piping. It was, and then there was a debris flow. So these kinds of trigger points are very difficult, and it will take years for us to train on this data and to get a good model that will predict and warn the people. See, if this is I should say, an extreme event. But there are in Munnar and also in Wayanad, there are areas that have a trigger which the authorities do take care of. But this does not fall in that category. To predict it earlier, there are lots of susceptibility models that has already been done. But to prevent it is where we have to concentrate now, where we have to have, really good integrated planning on, every region should have its specific planning goals, like where to build, how to build, and what to build. And today there are many sustainable technologies, like particularly along the hill road. So if you look at these landslides, many of these landslides are on the hill road. So they are the most vulnerable zones. So today there are many sustainable technologies that are pretty nascent actually. So those technologies which are in line with the natural environment can be adopted. One such thing is that there are some uh, geotextiles. Geotextiles are basically those reinforcements that you can provide for a slope so that it doesn't give away. So those now come with bags which have, the endemic species, the plants that usually grow in that particular region. So over a period of time, this geotextile, being natural, will give away, but instead the roots of the plant that germinate from it will hold the soil together. So those things are actually being tried in many different parts. This case study that I am saying was tried in Pune Highway. So such things can be, taken up in every region. That can be a long-term solution. Thank you. Hiya.
My question is regarding this ML and data science. So, as of I know, my understanding, my friends of all their works would be associated with collecting the data, like collecting from the dam, what to do, what to do. They will train the model, based on the output, they will predict the future. Kind of. So, what if this ML or data science are not there? There is solution or some other option of doing it?
For mapping,
Yeah.
ML,
ML or data
no,
science
they are
not
not the only models, right? You have also other models like the statistical models that were prior used to them. ML also, see, same logistic regression, what I programmed in Excel, now you are doing it in a different platform. Same logistic regression you're running, or you're learning the certainty factor method. So something like that. Earlier, the entire landslide study was based on geomorphological models, where they go to the site, they have a first-hand information on how the landslide, where it occurred, where is the scar, what is the depth. Those are the most reliable kind of landslide studies. till date there is more authenticity in going to the field and taking the real time data. These models are supplementary. They will help us to, they are quick, and they will help us to identify those locations which need a high priority. So the more accurate models are what you go and map in the field. Did I answer your questions, by the way? Okay.
Any more questions? So thanks for this wonderful section
Thank you,
on
Aravind.
land side, ma'am. I think we have good knowledge on land sites, flood, natural disasters. We have a small memento for you.
Thank you.